Hello and welcome back to the Boro Breakdown Opposition Preview Show with me, Tom, and my guest for the evening, Graham from What the Falk, back for his second appearance of the season. Graham, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Pleased that you had me back. Seems like I survived it. I think I got a little bit of stick in the comments, but that was to be expected. I kind of wanted that, so thanks for it. I appreciate it. I know it's all meant with love, so very good.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kick off then, just picking up on Sunderland season so far since we played each other, because I think it's been a lot of change for both teams. Obviously, change of manager for both, really. How would you sum up the season so far?
I think I was really positive last time I was on, and again, I've got to be positive once more. Obviously, take Saturday out the equation because I think you'll probably know this, but Championship referees are probably the worst referees I've ever come across in my life, and that was the worst referee I've ever seen in my life. So you can't always beat 12 men, especially not when you've only got 10. But in general, like outside of like the odd game here or there, like one game every 8, it's been great. And I think the biggest thing for me with Sunderland's season is that I think we just wanted to solidify ourselves. Like, don't get me wrong, I now feel like there's a chance of playoffs because the league is so tight, and I feel like we've got more quality than some. And at one point, we were fourth off top only a couple of weeks ago. So you never know. But there's we started off just wanting to be solidified in the league. Like I said, if we get 15th, I'll snap your hand off. Anything that's not League One, I'm delighted with. And then push on from there, sort of thing. But you know, we lost our manager, who like at a lumpet. Sunderland fans really liked Alex Neil at the time. He was the guy that kind of got us defensively solid, got us playing good football. He won at Wembley with us. He was kind of, for me, I cannot understand why he would ever throw that away, but it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, and then he brought in Tony Mowbray, which wasn't that exciting. He's kind of a bit of a boring appointment when it first happened, and I wasn't 100% sure it would work, especially considering he was coming into a club that didn't really want to lose the manager. He wasn't really replacing anyone. That's worked out fine. Mowbray's sound. He's playing wonderful. Got us playing wonderful football. He seems to be a perfect marriage between the club's model and the way that we play. Our best player, Ross Stewart, didn't get injured at all last season. So you're thinking, please don't get injured. And then 8 minutes before we play Middlesbrough at the Riverside, as you know, he gets a grade 3 tear in his thigh and he's out for 3 months. So we lose our best striker for 3 months, and we have to play with just one in Ellis Sims, who then coincidentally gets injured 2 games later. And then we play with no strikers for about 11 games. Eventually, they both come back and they start scoring goals. And Ellis Sims scores a goal in the last minute against Blackburn. You think, oh, here we go, brilliant. And Ellis Sims gets recalled by Everton. So everything that could have went wrong has gone wrong. And yet here we are, delighted with the season. I don't know if we've surprised ourselves or the Championship's just not as good as we kind of thought it might be. But there's no team that we've come up against this year that we've been completely out of it. I think the game earlier in the season against you lot, that sounded quite aggressive there. I didn't mean that. Against your team. Obviously, first 45 minutes we weren't in it, and it wasn't a good performance from ourselves, but then we were always in the game. Burnley, probably the best side we've come up against this season. We were 2-0 up against them at half-time. Yes, we lost 4-2, but that doesn't matter. Like, we held them for 45 minutes. We played really well, but there's been no team that's really massively impressed me this season in terms of being miles better than Sunderland, apart from Burnley in that 45-minute spell. But 45 minutes is not a full 90, and we play some really nice football. Our away form is really good. Our home form's starting to get sorted out. We've won, I think, 2 of the last 4 after previously only winning, I think, 2 of the last 8. So a 50% ratio as opposed to 20-25% or whatever. So that's improving. Ross Stewart's back and fit. Ross Stewart, we all felt would make the step up. He has. He's still our best player. Diallo has been an absolute revelation. Patrick Roberts has shown some really good ability. Jack Clark's a little bit off form, although he had quite a good game on Saturday. He's now, at the same time, scored 4 goals and assisted 6. So all the players that we hoped would make that step up have done. And I haven't even mentioned the likes of Luke O'Nien and Danny Bart, and the players that have arguably been our players of the year, especially Danny Bart, and the likes of Anthony Patterson's fitted in really well. So a lot better than expected is kind of the short answer, but I'm delighted that we are doing as well as we can. The challenge probably comes next season when the expectations raise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on it there, the result on Saturday and how poor the ref was. I mean, I watched the EFL highlight show. I did think you were probably unlucky to not get a penalty about 15 seconds before that red card.
Yeah.
But ended up as a 3-1 loss. And you mentioned earlier as well, it's kind of like 1 in 8. You'll have a loss or a bad game. What are you expecting the reaction to look like off the back of that loss on Sunday?
I've got like two heads on it really, because whenever we've had a bad performance, we've responded really well and gone like a good run of like 4 or 5 games where we haven't lost, or we've won a couple of games and maybe like narrowly lost against a good side, like I don't know, a Burnley, a Swansea, or whatever, away from home or something like that. But at the same time, there is always like this Sunderland mindset in the back of my head that goes, well, when is this going to go bad? By the way, when does this blow up in our face? And I'm kind of also worried about that as well. But I think if I think away from this kind of worried outlook that you have as a Sunderland fan, that everything's going to go wrong, because coincidentally it sometimes does. I do think, based on the form that the players have had this season, whenever we have lost a game, they have rolled their sleeves up and made sure that we at least get a positive result, be that a draw or a win. It's a bloody tough game, though. I don't think any of us look at Boro and think, well, that's a team you can just turn up well against and win the game. At the same time, we owe you one. I think it's been 2008 since we beat you at home, which is makes you a bit sick, that, doesn't it, really, when you think about it, 2008.
I remember that game and that still makes me sick.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to that game, I've been married, engaged, divorced and bought 2 houses since we last beat Boro at home. So, yeah, and there's quite a few things happened else in the middle there, but I won't bore your viewers, of course. But it's been a long while. And I know there's been like the times of us being in League One, and I know there's been times when we win the Premier League and you win the Championship. So there's like, we've only played each other about 6-7 times between that. But I think you've won either 5 of the last 6 or 6 of the last 7. So there's a feeling within, especially the people I speak to, that we do probably owe Boro one, but it's not going to be as easy just turning up and being like, oh, well, we owe Boro one, we're going to win. Are we capable of doing it? 100%. On our day, I think the likes of Diallo, Stewart, Roberts, Dan Neil in the middle, who's on great form at the moment, Dan Neil, are a match for anyone in this league. We've got a good, young, energetic team that's learning game by game, kind of the mistakes that they make, and they're kind of learning from and making things better. But we are still a very young team, and I think there's some wily old pros in that Boro side as well, which should make it quite an interesting matchup. But ultimately confident. I wouldn't want to lose the game. I don't really want to lose 2 home games in a row, because I'm especially not 2 home games, which, in isolation, losing a game against Swansea, who are a decent enough team, when you've gone down to 10 men and the referee is absolutely atrocious, it's fine. And then losing against Middlesbrough at home, who are a good team, but I expect to get promoted on a good run of form, yada yada, in isolation is fine in the context of the season. But everyone knows what momentum's like in football. You win 2 games, you feel like you can win the next 10. You lose 2 games, you feel like you're never going to win until May. And I think we're 12 points away from the relegation zone, but that's only 4 games, and the Championship's a wild league. I don't even think about having a look over my shoulder at any point. I don't think we will. I'd be comfortable with a draw, but I think we're capable of winning the game. And the response from poor results in the past have always been really, really impressive, to the point where even I've been a bit taken aback by the character and the togetherness of the team. So fingers crossed they can do what they've done all season and bounce back, and hopefully, for our sake, get one over Boro for the first time in, I don't know, about 4 centuries or something.
So I believe, I don't think I'm wrong here, but there's been no transfer incomings for Sunderland just yet this season, this window, although you are close to someone.
I believe so. Pierre, I can't pronounce his surname, so I won't try, but he plays for West Ham, yes.
Yeah. So other than that looking close, do you know if Sunderland are looking to get any business done this window?
There's been a few tentative links. I think we were linked to Sam Surridge from Nottingham Forest. I think, as I touched on before on our podcast, we've obviously lost Ellis because, I don't know, Everton don't know how to manage a young player and understand where his development is best used, which of course would be with Sunderland. He's not really getting game time at Everton, so He might come back.
Got blamed for the result of the weekend, didn't he?
I've seen that. He got like abused in his car, didn't he? Which, I've got a lot of time for Everton as a football club. I really like them. It's the old phrase of Everton are a proper football club. I don't know what that means, but that they are. But it was the wrong move to take him back, and it's left us short because we've only got Ross Stewart up front. And as I said before, we played about 11 games without any strikers, and there comes a point where you go, well, this didn't work. And bless them for trying as well as they did, and we actually somehow got through it. But God, the table could look so much better with a fit striker or two. And it's no coincidence that our results really improved when Ellis Sims came back, and then improved tenfold when Roscoe came back. We need a striker, 100%. I think we need two, if I'm completely honest. Nathan Broadhead obviously had a great season on loan this last season from Everton. He then, for some reason, went to Wigan. I think it had something to do with the fact that he felt that he wasn't going to get as much game time as he wanted because of Sims and Stewart. But by the by, really, I would have liked him to come back. As it was, we were never really interested in him again. In January, it turns out we didn't look interested in him at all. We've had loose links that I think have got a bit of umbrage about them in a young boy from Hungary called Nemeth, not Slizard. Very, very different man for the people who remember that from a Sunderland perspective. I'm sure you will remember Slizard Nemeth. In terms of him, I think he's like 20-year-old. He's had one cap for Hungary, scored one goal. His attributes in terms of his stats and his data, which is what our model and our plan is, look very similar to what Ross Stewart was before he joined Sunderland, so it would make sense. But I would be incredibly disappointed if we didn't bring in someone who's a little bit more wily and experienced in the middle to give Corey Evans an option, because Corey Evans, as much as he's not flashy and you don't think about him as being important, when he comes out the team, there's just nothing like him. There's no one to have a bit of experience in the middle and sweep up and pass and keep it simple. And we do miss him when he's not there, I think. At least I can count on one hand the amount of times we've been able to not play him and pull that result. Although when we have, it's been great, of course. I think we'll beat Wigan 4-1 without him, but that was more of an anomaly rather than an exception to the rule rather than a regular thing. We need a striker, though. I think if we didn't get a striker in this window, it's ridiculous. There's the idea that Leon Diaku can play up front. I'm sorry, Mr. Speakman. I'm sure you know a lot more than me because you dealt with Jude Bellingham's sort of upbringing, I suppose, and he's done really, really well in the transfer market. But if you think Leon Diaku is a centre forward, then I don't have a hole in my arse because he's just not. He's barely even a left winger, and Diallo, as good as he is definitely either a number 10 or a winger. So there's been links to strikers, so I think they are after them. I think it's maybe just safeguarding, saying, Diaku can play up front in case things go absolutely, can I say tits up? I've said it now, haven't I? But I think there'll be 2 or 3 more coming in. I think we could do with a good, solid midfielder that would challenge Corey Evans. I believe this guy in the middle from West Ham is a similar position to Corey Evans, but he's only a Bain. And there's always a risk with that, no matter how you look at it, although it's worked out for us most of the time. And up front, we definitely need cover for Ross Stewart. Ross Stewart's the number 1, but you kind of go the rest of the season with just Ross Stewart. We went the rest of the season with just Ellis Sims and Ross Stewart and lost them both, and were knackered for 11 games. So if they don't learn from that mistake, there'll be steam coming out of my ears and a few of the Sunderland fans. So I think we'll bring a centre forward, at least one.
So you've mentioned the need for a striker there, and Sims and Stewart. I want to talk about Sims just before we go on to Ross Stewart. But other than kind of in terms of the numbers, how are Sunderland missing Ellis Sims after being recalled by Everton? Is it a change in play style or anything? Because that game earlier in the season, I thought he was a right handful for our defenders, and I thought he was constantly looking dangerous when he was going forward. I told one of my best mates who was a Sunderland fan, I was texting him during the game, and he was like, he's not that great for us, like he can't shoot and stuff like that, but he looked a real handful.
Ellis Sims for Sunderland would kind of depend on who you spoke to, but I would say 75% of Sunderland fans probably preferred him. Don't get me wrong, he had flaws. Like sometimes he didn't have, his movement was quite good, but it's like sometimes his intelligence was off, which is kind of weird because his movement in the box was really intelligent. But I think it took a long while for Sunderland fans to realise what Ellis Sims was. He had the best kind of debut, came in, scored a goal in 5 minutes, and then equalised in the second half and we won 3-2. Roscoe got the other one, and suddenly we've got the sass, Sims and Stewart and all that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us thought, Stewart was the more cultured player that could hold the ball up, would score goals when the ball's in the air, could lay the ball off. He's got a bit of pace, Stewart, which people don't realise because he's 6'5", but he gallops. He's got a lot of pace. I think people thought Sims was going to be the battering ram that was, able to knock things down to him. And actually, it's kind of the other way around. Like, Ross Stewart's always going to score goals for Sunderland, but Ellis Sims was just a natural finisher. He was not actually that good in the air. His touch wasn't that great, but his goal against Blackburn, which was his last one for us, I hope he does come back. I hope he scores more goals for Sunderland. But the one he scored against Blackburn was just like sublime. Like, it took about 10 minutes for it to go in the back of the net, but he just ghosted one way, ghosted another, and then outside of his boot, about the slowest toe punt I've ever seen in my life in the bottom corner. But he just seemed to be in the right place at the right time, and his finishing ability was great. And I think as much as, Ellis was probably not someone who would ever replace Ross Stewart up top, he was someone who could either aid Ross Stewart up front or give us an option to rest Ross Stewart at the worst case scenario. And even though there was a lot of some fans thought he was lazy, I don't really agree with that at all. I don't think he was. I think the way his game is that he is not a goal hanger, but he's a finisher. And, tell me a finisher that's running around mad and used up all his energy. I don't think he needs to. Where we miss out with Ellis is the fact that he scored a lot of goals. I think he had 12 shots on target and 7 goals. That's not bad. That's basically down to his finishing ability. It's a second option towards Stewart if we don't play Stewart up front. It's also, he was really good up front with Stewart as well if we want to play 2 up top. That's how we were doing it an awful lot until they both got injured. And I think if you look at Sunderland's results from the tail end of when Ellis Sims was due to come back, like the last 3 or 4 games, we were beginning to struggle. And then Ellis Sims came back in for like 20 minutes at Luton. We equalised at Luton and got a draw. I think he came in the next game. I can't remember quite who it was, but we got a result then. Then Ellis Sims starts playing up front whilst we wait for Ross Stewart to come back permanently and give us another option. And the results were just better because there was a centre forward there that knew how to lead the line. I think we might bring somebody else in and then potentially wait on Ellis Sims. I feel really sorry for Ellis, if I'm honest with you, because I watched him, I obviously live up in Scotland, and I watched him last season for Hearts, and that gave him a lot of development. He developed at Blackpool as well. I think this was perfect for his development to play in front of a big expectant crowd, the same sort of attendances as Everton, scoring goals, dealing with the expectation, dealing with the week-by-week kind of perma-crisis that you can have as a fan in the North East. Like, if you win, you're going to win the league. If you lose, oh God, are we going to get relegated? We all have that in the North East because we're so passionate about it, and it sort of rules our life. And I think that would have been perfect for him to maybe go at the end of the season, go to Everton if they stayed up, which is, well, that might not happen. I think it would have been perfect for him. I think it's a real shame he's been called back. Like, we can cope without Ellis Sims. We can't cope without another striker being brought in. But I would have much preferred Ellis to stay because I think he benefited us a lot. I think he scored goals. He was a good finisher. And I think mainly for Ellis, I think it's a real shame that he's gone back to Everton. Seems to be getting abused in his car for something he cannot handle. He's been there 5 minutes and played 17 minutes of football and came on when they were getting beat 4-0 against Brighton and 2-1 against Southampton when the whole atmosphere around Everton at the minute's toxic. I'm not saying this wrong. I understand Everton scarily remind me of Sunderland, but ultimately I feel more sorry for Ellis than I do for Sunderland, but I'd love him back if Everton sign a striker for silly money and make more silly recruitment decisions that they've made over the past 5 years and decide that Ellis Sims is actually best served having his first team experience at Sunderland, then there'll be no one more delighted than me, but it's still like another one on top. It's tough because Ellis, you can't sit and wait for him the whole window. As much as you might want to, you can't. We need to bring someone in, but hopefully we get someone in like an MF or someone who can like help with that forward line, and then hopefully Ellis becomes available again near the end of the window. We end up with 3, and I'll be a very happy man if we do.
It's just clicked for me when you said that, the similarities between Everton and Sunderland when you guys were in the Premier League. I think all Everton are missing at the moment is like Allardyce or Di Canio to come in and save the season, and the similarities increase. But yeah, just going on to Ross Stewart then. So obviously he's pretty much the danger man for you guys. I think that's like league wide. That's known. But speculation regarding him won't go away. We've been linked with him the last couple of windows, and I think for us that's probably stopped now with the signing of Cameron Archer. But I know Rangers were after him as well. Is it showing? Is he showing any signs of it affecting him on the pitch? I think only a few days ago as well. Don't know how true it is. I read a rumor on Twitter that he'd been offered a new contract and turned it down. And also, do you expect him to still be a Sunderland player at the end of the month?
I'll answer your last question first without hoping I'm not tempting fate. I think if Sunderland sold Ross Stewart to another Championship team by the end of the window, considering we've only got him as a striker at the moment, I think there'd be like hell to pay, to be honest, because Ross is an excellent striker. He's not just a goal scorer. He just brings so much to our team. He's so much better than I could have ever hoped for. I honestly thought we'd sign him and he'd end up on loan at St Mirren again or something in a couple of seasons, and he'd just do a job in League One. But he's such a phenomenal striker. He can hold the ball up. He's got pace. His finishing ability is excellent. His brain for where other players are on the pitch and the way he links up with people is just second to none. For me, I think outside of maybe Gyökeres, I think he's the best striker in the league. I know people debate me on that, but it doesn't matter. Opinion's opinion. And
Chuba Akpom as well, got to be up there.
Yeah, I figured you might say that, but trust me, Frost goes miles better. But I'm a massive fan, is the kind of long story short. I think he'll stay to the end of the season. I think the summer's difficult, especially if he continues to score in like every game. I think he's got 5 and 6 since he's come back, and the game he didn't score in was when he was down to 10 men. And we should have had 2 penalties. He takes our penalties, so like he would have scored there. But yeah, it's a huge worry. I'm not going to lie. I think if you go through the What the Falk Twitter feed and probably even my own personal feed, it's perma like worry about Ross Stewart going somewhere, because we were talking going down. The Scottish branch went down to the match on Saturday, and we were talking about like. So I'm 37 this year. So I lived in the Quinn Phillips era and stuff like that. And we said, like, not who do you think's been the best Sunderland player, but who's your favourite? And Ross got in there for me. And I meant that. Like, he scored at Wembley. I've never seen Sunderland win at Wembley in my lifetime. And he scored at Wembley. He got the clincher. And I don't know, he was the shining light during a time when I thought, like, we were never getting out of League One, and he's continued to be part of that progression. He's been part of like Sunderland reigniting themselves, and a big part of it. The difficulty is we have this model where we don't want to spend X, Y, or Z because, will other people be knocking on the door and want more money and stuff like that. My personal opinion is if you were to sell Ross Stewart for anything between 10 to 15 million, the amount of money that you would waste trying to replace him for years on end, some Sunderland fans would say, well, this scouting model found Ross Stewart. Why wouldn't they do that again? Because players just don't come along like that and fit that well. That's I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's my opinion on it. And I think Ross is so important. He's very happy here. I can guarantee he's very happy here. I know that. Don't need to go into the details of it. I just do. He wants to stay here, but at the same time, I think he's 26. The clubs he's been at previous have been Kilwinning Juniors, St Mirren, Ross County. Like, he's not played for clubs that are going to give him life-changing wages. Players that play for clubs at that level for the rest of their career will probably have enough to get by for a couple of years, but they'll need to get a job like a personal trainer or a teacher, whatever it may be. That's just the way it is. Ross is now in a position where he can financially look after his family for the rest of his life. And I don't think that means he's wanting 40 grand a week, but I think if the rumoured 10 to 13,000 per week is what he's been offered, I think that's a bit of a joke, to be honest. And I understand him turning it down because it's just not what he's worth. He's worth a lot more than that. And I think, yes, it was under different recruitment models, and yes, it was under far worse chairman. But I've seen Josh Madger leave Sunderland and go to Boro, and we signed Will Grigg. We wasted loads of money trying to sign a striker to replace him. That just didn't work. Transfer fee, wages and everything. When we could have just offered that at Josh Madger, we probably would have went up the first season. Darren Bent leaving Sunderland, as much as I absolutely can't stand the bloke, because I understand, I personally think that came out she agreed. But when we sold Darren Bent, we never replaced him to the point where he actually ended up on loan at Burton and relegated us to League One. And it was just like, well, there we go. There's the story. That was the start of our downfall when Darren Bent left. We never really recovered from that. And I think if Ross goes, that is it. And I think for me, if he gets a bid from a Premier League team and someone says there's 20 million, we're going to give you 40 grand a week. Yeah, I'll be devastated. I'll probably actually shed a wee tear, but it's hard to turn down a player going to the Premier League. We get that. If we end up messing about his contract and he ends up at a Stoke or a Middlesbrough, I'll be absolutely livid. Because there's no reason why a player who's 100% happy at your football club and plays a massive part in your role should go to a team in the same division simply because you don't want to offer him an extra, I don't know, 4 or 5 grand or something like that. And I think,
What about Rangers? Because I know they're one of the clubs that were linked, and from what I'd heard, it sounded like he was maybe a fan of them, but
there's definitely interest there. As far as I'm aware, Ross actually doesn't have an Old Firm club, weirdly enough. He's from Irvine, which is actually a big Rangers stronghold, just outside of Rangers. It's a very sort of blue area. But I believe he doesn't actually have like a club either way, but he'll understand the size of Rangers. And I understand the club the size of Rangers. I'll go see Rangers. If I'm not seeing Sunderland, I'll go see Rangers if I'm completely honest with you, because that's kind of like local to me, the most local club to where I live. Yeah, that would be hard to turn down as well. I think I'd maybe even understand that if I'm completely honest. Not because I think the division's amazing. I think the Scottish Premiership is probably the equivalent of the Championship, and at some points top of League One at best. But I mean, I went to games last year in the European run, and I've never seen an atmosphere like those games against Dortmund and Leipzig and stuff like that. So I can understand him watching it and wanting to go. I would totally get it. I think there will be Sunderland fans listening and saying, well, we coped without Jermaine Defoe, we coped without Kevin Phillips. They were better strikers than Ross Stewart, and they went. 100% agree. Both were better strikers and scored at higher levels. However, Jermaine Defoe left when Sunderland got relegated. Kevin Phillips left when Sunderland got relegated. Niall Quinn retired when we were on our downward spiral. To lose a player when we're on an upward peak for the sake of a couple of thousand would absolutely devastate me, if I'm completely honest. I'm going to be upset whenever he goes. I just hope when he does go, it's to a club where I go, well, fair enough.
Well, looking ahead to Sunday and speaking about a player who definitely won't be playing, Luke O'Nine's been suspended for the tackle against Swansea. How big of a miss do you think he's going to be? Because at the weekend, I was talking to me mate about it who sports Sunderland, and he said, he's the type of player who is there to put in a meaty tackle when you want him to. And I said, by the sounds of it, he just did, and he got sent off for it. But yeah, how big of a miss is he going to be on Sunday?
For me, massive. Like a lot of there's been a lot of chat about him online this week, saying he's a liability and he's just that and the other. And we discussed it on our own podcast. I really love Luke as a bloke, as a player, and because he can put a decent tackle in most of the time, and he can pass a ball and he can head a ball and he does all the basics right. People say he's got limited ability, but he's full of heart and full of energy. But like, what is a good footballer at this level? Someone who can pass. He can pass a ball. He can pass long and short. Can he tackle? Yeah, most of the time he can tackle. Maybe he was a bit rash on Saturday, fair enough. But most of the time he's a good tackler. He's very good in the air, especially for his height. So he's good at heading. He can pop up with the occasional goal. He can play in various different positions. So where is he limited? Is what I would say. Like, where's his limited ability? What? Because he can't like dribble past a million players and score a goal from 40 yards makes him limited. People used to say Kevin Ball was all blood and thunder and heart. I'm not comparing him to Kevin Ball, but people used to always say Kevin Ball will give you 100% effort. But Bally was a pretty good player as well. He could score, he could pass, he could head, he could tackle. He could pass long, he could pass short. He could play centre-half, he could play central midfield. So was he not a good player? There's nothing limited there that I've said. He's actually far from limited because he can do a lot of things. And that's how I feel about Luke. I'm a huge fan. I think he's a massive miss. For me, before his red card on Saturday, I said to the lad in front of me, I said, apart from maybe Danny Bart and maybe Ross Stewart when he's played, so arguably you would say like O'Nine's been our player of the year this year. And it's funny, most people would have probably agreed with that. And then he put that reckless challenge in. I didn't think it was a red card, but I'm the minority. Most people did. I won't bore your life with why I didn't think it was, because most people disagree with me anyway. So, and then this week, everyone seemed to kind of think he's a bit of a liability. He cost us the game. It's probably a good thing that he's missing. He's not that good at centre half anyway. But if you're asking me for my own personal opinion, I think Luke's massive. I think Luke's massive for his personality on the pitch, not his personality away from the pitch. People talk about him smiling and being nice. I'm not bothered about that. Like, he could grimace every 5 minutes and not do the fist punch and all that kind of stuff. But his personality on the pitch is really important. I think he backs his mates up. He's got a bit of shithousery about him that he's obviously picked up from Wickham, which does sometimes help. Yes, does he sometimes take it too far? 100%. But if his tackling was absolutely perfect, and if his shithousery was absolutely perfect, the way it never get noticed and he didn't go too far, he'd be playing in the Premier League. For me, he's a very good Championship centre-half. He'll be a huge miss. We're lucky in the sense that we can bring in some good centre-halves to replace him. Danny Bart came in on Saturday. He's returned. He's arguably been our best player this season. Total unsung hero. Absolute brick shit house, if I'm honest with you. And a bloody good defender. That's a solid Championship defender. So he should be able to be covered okay. But I just like Luke. For me, one of the first names on the team sheet for me, be it right back, be it in centre-half. He's definitely a defender. If it was in midfield, I'd say, no, he'd be all right. I don't really rate him in midfield, which is where we signed him. But for me, massive. But there'll be a lot of Sunderland fans listening who think I'm talking absolute horseshite. But that's the beauty of football, isn't it? Opinions, I think.
So how do you expect Sunderland to line up on Sunday then? And other than Ross Stewart, who we've mentioned and we're all aware of, who are the danger men going to be in the lineup for Boro?
I'll go answer your first question first, so I can think of who we might actually have in the lineup in the back of my mind. Diallo wasn't very good on Saturday. He struggled a little bit because we had to take Patrick Roberts off when the red card happened. But his link-up play, Diallo and Patrick Roberts' link-up play is frighteningly good. It's all like one-touch football. I loved when we played Wigan. I've said this on a few podcasts now, but we played Wigan, and Roberts came on, and we absolutely ripped it out of James McLean because they just took the mick out of him. One touch pass and little back heels, and then Patrick Roberts runs into the box and scores. Deflected, but let's forget about it being deflected. It was a good goal. But Diallo and Roberts for me are both excellent. Jack Clark had a horrendous game at the Riverside. He was awful. But when Jack Clark's on it, and he's scarily good when he's confident. I think sometimes he always looks confident, but I think sometimes he's not 100% sure if he can beat his man, and that is his age. But our forward line's really good. But I'll forget all of them, all the flashy names, the Roberts, the Diallo, the Ross Stewart, all the players that I know are gonna be the ones that get the headlines 9 times out of 10. I'll go with Dan Neil. For me, Dan is a really, really good young talent, and I think sooner rather than later, there's going to be teams above us, i.e. Premier League. I'm not saying Man United, don't get me wrong, but teams in the Premier League that'll be looking at him and going, can he cut it in the level above? He had a few games at the start of the season where he had probably wanted a little bit too much time on the ball. Sheffield United was a key example. He got the ball in the D, tried to turn, didn't realize the guy behind him. Guy took the ball off him, kicked him over, got sent off, was suspended for a game, and you were like, oh. And he did that a few times at the start of the season. He's now cut that out, and he's now turned into a player that all the good stuff kind of comes through him originally. Much like yourselves, we play the ball out from the back 9 times out of 10. We're not like Swansea to the point where it's actually boring and everything's a blooming pass, but we do like to try and play ourselves out from the back if we can. And Dan Neil's normally the one that picks that up. And he's forward thinking, and he's passing, and his movement, and his ability to like bring the ball in and like win the ball as well, and distribute it to like the more attacking players, whilst also being able to get in the box these days. He scored 2 goals this season, both being in the box. Last season he scored 3; they were all long ranges. So he's learned to get in the box as well and score. He scored on Saturday, and on current form, Dan Neil's probably been the one that's really stood out. So he'll fancy it as well because I think it's his first derby at the Stadium of Light, if we're classing it as a derby. He's a Sunderland boy. Well, he's from heaven. He's a Sunderland fan. He'll fancy it. He's on good form. But it would be remiss of me to tell you that Patrick Roberts and Amad Diallo and Ross Stewart are not really on form.
On the other side of things, is there anyone from Boro at the moment that you're really not looking forward to coming up against?
Yeah, a couple. I'll tell you who really impressed me, and I don't think it'll surprise you, in the game at the Riverside. Ryan Giles. I thought he was excellent. I thought his delivery was frighteningly good. And every time I don't know if he was on your corners. I kind of feel like he was on your corners that night, but whenever he put a delivery in, it panicked me a bit. Combined with the fact that we didn't play that well in the first 45, his delivery was really good, and it was like 9 times out of 10, his delivery seemed superb. He was really good at coming up on the left, and obviously he played a little bit further forward because he had the back five that night. But the one that impressed me most is a player that might not even play, Isaiah Jones. He was superb in that game. He absolutely tortured us at points. But is he likely to be playing on Sunday?
Well, we wouldn't know at the moment. He was dropped from the team altogether in the last game against Millwall. And what Carrick's came out and said is that he's kind of been managed, been taken out of the spotlight because he had hit a difficult bit of form. And I think a lot of fans would say he had been for a longer amount of time than maybe Carrick would say. But he had hit a bit of difficult form, so he wanted to kind of take him out of the spotlight. We can't forget as well, he's still a young kid, really. He's 22. He only broke through into the first team last year. Everyone's going to come up against this type of thing. It's all about how he's going to be managed. So you're probably more likely to be coming up against Marcus Forss on the right hand side than Isaiah Jones on Sunday.
Another player that obviously is going to be a concern, but I think if I had to pick people out, obviously Ryan Giles and Jones were the ones that stood out for me. I think Johnny Howson's been there and done it, and I talked about Wiley plays in the middle. Obviously, he's going to be important. Akpom seems to be scoring at will at the moment, which is obviously massively important as well. But if you want my God's honest truth, the one that worries me the most, and you'll smile as soon as I say this because you know exactly why I'm saying it, Duncan Watmore terrifies me. Not because I think he's a great player, or not because I thought he was like amazing at Sunderland. I actually like Duncan at Sunderland, and I'm pleased to see he's doing well. But I know he's probably not likely to play. He might just come off the bench. But it's just written in the script, isn't it, that Duncan Watmore's going to have a decent game against Sunderland. So if you tell me who I'm most worried about, probably Duncan Watmore because of just like the low of averages that he's going to end up playing well against us.
Well, I mean, he might come on as a sub, but you might still have Paddy McNair at centre back, who might be a worry for the same reason.
Yeah, I'm worried about Duncan because I feel like Duncan would be the only, like it would be typical for us to have a player that had 2 ACL injuries at Sunderland to come back and then score against us when we thought maybe his career might have been finished and he couldn't really hit a barn door with a banjo in League One. But, on a serious note, I really like Duncan. And outside of Sunday, I always like to see him do well because he seems like a nice enough kid.
So on Sunday, where do you think the game's going to be won and lost for Sunderland?
I think it could be a battle of the strikers, because I think both midfields, obviously normally every game's normally won in midfield, but I think we've both got decent defences, but we've both got strikers that are scoring goals at the minute. I kind of forget I mentioned Patrick Roberts before, and I forget that he played for Boro. I don't think he did very well.
He scored. I don't think he necessarily did. He wasn't necessarily our worst ever loan player or anything, but he scored a very, very important goal away at Reading to keep us up in the COVID season when Neil Warnock took over. So he's probably always going to be in fans' minds for that because it's a very important goal. It was that important people put the Titanic music over it and shared it around socials.
I love Wee Paddy, so I think he'll be up for it because you always are against your clubs, as I touched on with Watmore before. I think it'll be a really high-scoring draw, as good as both defences are. I think most defences struggle with Ross Stewart. I think you'll struggle a bit with Diallo because he's frighteningly good. And Giles, as much as I was impressed by him, looked more of an attacking fullback than a defensive one. So Diallo and Roberts might have a bit more joy down there. But do I also think we can keep you out completely? The defence was not that great on Saturday. I know you don't have 10 men. There's reasons for it and yada yada, but it wasn't great. As long as story short, the goals were actually some of them avoidable. So we know there's sometimes a little bit of gap in there. Obviously, it's going to change a little bit because O'Nine's not there and Danny Bart's coming back and he's next to Ballard and so on and so forth. But and we don't have a left back at the minute. That kind of doesn't help either. So I think it'll be a high-scoring draw, and I think the game, if it is to be won as opposed to drawn, I think it's going to come from whoever basically scores the most, Akpom or Stewart, whoever gets the most joy, which you could also say whoever gets the most joy in the midfield. Is it going to be the wily old Johnny Howson in the middle kind of dominating the field or dominating the midfield, or is it going to be the young up-and-comer Dan Neil that's going to show the old man how it's done in 2023. That's also really important, I think, as well.
So you said high scoring draw. Last question. Do you want to make a prediction of what it'll be?
I'm not very good at them, so it's probably a waste of time. So if you're a betting person and you're thinking, I'll see what Graham does and I'm going to go for it, I'm going to warn you, don't. I've got 2 right this season, and apparently if I got all the results right, and I'm quite a pessimistic person, apparently if I got all the results right this season, Sunderland will be 3rd off top. So that just tells you I'm nowhere near very good at predictions. But, I think we'll stop the run of defeats against you. I know we drew the last time we played at home, but it feels like I think you've won, I'm sure it's 6 of the last 7 or 5 of the last 6. I kind of see us losing 2 home games in a row, but I'm not 100% sure we can beat you. I think you'll struggle with our forward line. I think we'll struggle with yours. And I think 2-2. I think I said 2-2 on my podcast, so I'll stick with it, Tom, and say 2-2.
Yeah, I think anyone who listens to our Sunday show knows I've got 2-1. But that's everything for today. Graham, thanks for joining me. Just if you want to give your podcast or socials a little plug here, in case any Boro fans want to kind of read up on your perspective or listen to your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. So if you go to @WhatTheFalkPod, that's where I kind of tweet my maiden ramblings from the Sunderland perspective. Obviously, we do a preview show, which you've been on as well, Tom, and we did it earlier with Johnny. We'll have a review show based on the game as well. So if you do win, it's probably going to be quite good listening for you lot. Listening us lot be absolutely sick. But we try to be as fair and as balanced as we can. And anyone who does listen to my show and listens to the preview pod, which is available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all that kind of the good place and the good stuff, you'll notice they did a very good intro that was actually quite complimentary of Middlesbrough and incredibly uncomplimentary to that lot up the road. So hopefully that gets me on your good side. But yeah, just the usual places, and then at what the Falk pod if you want to abuse me after you've won or potentially lost or drew.
I'm sure our listeners won't do that. But thanks again for joining us, Graham. That was all your Boro Breakdown opposition preview show in a pod.